Hi, welcome to Budget MTG Decks. All magic fun, all cards under $1. I'm David and this is my ally Ruud.
Hey everybody, today we're going to talk about all the colorless and multicolored cards in the Battle for Zendikar set. This guide will help you to evaluate all the cards in the limited format, so this means draft and sealed. For example, your pre-release event. To evaluate all the cards we used a little bit of a different type of tiers than all the other sites do. Most sites use E, D, C, B, A rankings and we use 3 tiers. So you can divide your cards during the pre-release into one of the 3 tiers. The first tier is the best cards, so the big bombs you really want to play, you want to be in that color just for that card. The second tier will be the good cards, if you have a lot of them you want to be drawn into that color. And the third tier are the filler cards, so only the cards you would use when you already are in the color to fill up your mana curve, of course. We'll also put some cards aside we really think you should never use.
Yeah. Now this review is a little bit different than the other ones that you've seen. Those were all colors. However, now we're going to do a section on colorless cards, and then we're going to do a section right after that on all the multicolored cards. We're going to start with the commons. Our first common card is Hedron Blade. For 1 colorless mana we get an equipment, and for 2 mana we can equip a creature with it. It gives a creature +1/+1, and whenever this equipped creature becomes blocked by 1 or more colorless creatures, it gains Death Touch till the end of turn. I mean, talk about situationally good. This card is super situational. I mean, you gotta pay 3 mana just to get it on a creature to give him +1/+1, and then somebody has to be stupid enough to block it with their colorless creature. No, it's just no good.
No, I think so too. You should put it aside. Even a card that does pretty much the same, but then unconditional Death Touch would be playable, would be okay, but even that wouldn't be great.
No.
So I think this isn't playable. No. The next card, Colorless Channeler. Ooh. It's a 4/4 creature for 5 mana, and you can tap it to add 2 colorless mana to your mana pool.
So
now, in this set, this is really strong. You really want to ramp into your biggest Eldrazi. You can use this with any combination of colors. In green, it might be a little less useful if you have a lot of other ramp. I think it would still be useful. I think you will always want one of these in your deck. So I would say tier 1 actually for this common card. If you have multiples, of course, it becomes less valuable, less playable. It would become tier 2, and if you have like 5, which you won't, then you don't put all 5 in your deck.
So I think if I would pull 2 of these, I would play both, because the first one would be tier 1, the second would be tier 2, and since tier 2 means you always want to include it if you are in those colors, and since it's colorless, you are always in the colorless colors, definitely include at least 2 if you can. The next card is Ruin Processor. For 7 mana we get a 7/8. Now these are the Eldrazi that we've been hearing so much about. These are the big beasts, the beat sticks that we've been waiting for, and super exciting. It also has an ability, it's a processor. When you cast Ruin Processor, you may put a card your opponent owns from exile back into their graveyard. If you do, gain 5 life. You know what? Who cares about that? For 7 mana we get a 7/8. And it goes in any color. Yeah,
I think it will be a tier 3. It's not one of the best Eldrazi creatures, certainly not. Especially the gain 5 life isn't really that much. It can be champ blocked pretty easily. But still it will be a 7/8 for 7 mana, so it's still okay. If you don't have anything else for 7 mana, then it's certainly playable.
Yeah, think about Colorless Channeler on turn 5 and then turn 6. Even if you didn't drop a land, you can cast this guy. Pretty sweet.
True. Then we have Scour from Existence. For 7 mana it's an instant and you can exile target permanent. Now the casting cost is quite steep, but exiling a permanent is of course really strong. You can use it on anything.
At instant speed.
At instant speed, so it's great
so
removal, only a lot of mana, so it will still be tier 2.
Yeah. If it would be a little bit cheaper, it would have been tier 1. It is amazing, but yeah, I probably always at least want to include one of these, unless you're playing so aggro that you're never going to get to 7 mana. But
we would have to say there are a lot of 7 or 8 mana cards, maybe a lot of tier 1 cards, so it might even happen that you really have too much of those, so you won't include it. But I think mostly you really want this type of removal.
Especially if you're in green. There's a lot of tier 1 cards in green. Alright, then we go to Eldrazi Devastator. For 8 mana we get an 8/9 with Trample. This is also tier 1 in my opinion, makes it such a powerful bomb in common. Why? Because it's big, 2, because it has evasion, you can get through, it won't get chump blocked. That is huge when it comes to big Eldrazi.
True, I think also tier 1.
Then we go to the uncommons. The first uncommon card is Pathway Arrows. Now, it's a 1 mana artifact equipment, and for 2 mana we get to equip target creature. Then that creature has pay 2 mana, tap it, deal 1 point of damage to target creature. If that creature is colorless, you get to tap it. Think about it, you gotta pay 1 mana to put it on the battlefield, then 2 mana to equip it, then another 2 mana, so you're paying 5 mana for the chance to be able to do 1 point of damage or conditionally to tap a creature. That is really way too many conditions you have to meet, and it's way too much mana for an effect like that. I say put it aside.
I say put it aside too. Of course, in an ideal world you could remove colorless big Eldrazi with it. You can tap the creature each turn, of course. But it will cost you 2 cards because you do have to tap the creature. That creature won't be able to attack or block anymore. You have to tap it before it declares attackers. And that is conditional, so no. Then we have the next card, Slab Hammer. For 2 mana we get an equipment, we can equip it for 2 mana.
And it costs 2 mana?
I said it, yeah. And whenever a equipped creature attacks, you may return a land you control to your owner's hand. And if you do, the creature gets +2/+2. Well, I would say put it aside, it's 4 mana and you do have to return a land, so you won't get your land drops anymore. Of course it will trigger your landfall, but yeah, it's just too much mana and it doesn't do that much.
No, just put it aside, don't think too much about it. Then we go to Pilgrim's Eye. For 3 mana we get a 1/1 flying Thopter. When Pilgrim's Eye enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land card, reveal it and put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Now I would say this is tier 3. Why? The 1/1 flyer isn't too impressive. However, the fact that you can also look for a land gives you a little bit of card advantage, maybe color fixes you, and the fact that it is colorless means you can use it to fix your colors even if you're not in green, which is actually quite nice. I would say tier 3.
Yeah, it's usable if you don't have enough other fixing.
Yeah.
Then we have Titan's Presence. For 3 mana we get an instant, and as an additional cost to play this, you have to reveal a colorless card from your hand. Chances are you can do that. You can exile target creature if its power is less than the revealed card's power. So this is pretty conditional. You need a bigger creature, or as big as the creature you want to remove in your hand. It needs to be colorless. It is still removal at instant speed, and you can remove a lot of big colorless threats maybe. So it is tier 3, only if you don't have anything better.
Yeah, you don't, well, it's not limited to removing colorless threats. You can remove any threat, but the problem is you do need to be heavy in either the colorless Eldrazi or in the devoid creatures to make sure that you can actually use it. Yeah, I agree, tier 3, if you don't have better removal, it will do. Then we have Hedron Archive for 4 mana. It's an artifact that allows us to tap for 2 mana. We can also pay 2 mana, tap it and sacrifice it, and then draw 2 cards. I kind of like this card actually, because there's not a lot of consistent mana ramp in this set. This one actually does quite a lot of work. I would say tier 2, and plus, even if later on in the game you don't need all that extra mana, you can't sacrifice it for those extra cards. It's pretty nice.
Yeah, extra 2 cards is pretty nice, of course. So it's a really good card. The next card is Deathless Behemoth. For 6 mana you get a creature 6/6 Vigilance, and you can sacrifice 2 Eldrazi Silence to return it to your hand from your graveyard. I mean, yeah, it's pretty good. Of course, a 6/6 Vigilance for 6 is really good, so I will put it into tier 2. Yeah. The return from your graveyard is not that relevant, I think. It can be used, but if you can, you should. But I think it's just a great creature.
Yeah, exactly. The Vigilance is pretty nice as well. Nice little bonus. Then we go to Ulamog's Despoiler. For 6 mana we get a 5/5. This one's a little bit smaller, but it's a processor, which means that if you can return, when it enters the battlefield, if you can return 2 cards that your opponent controls from exile back into their graveyard, then it will actually enter the battlefield with an additional 4+1/+1 counters on it. So then, for 6 mana, all of a sudden, it is a 9/9. That is pretty impressive. However, it's not as powerful as some of the other Eldrazi we saw because it doesn't have trample. That's kind of a downside. I would say tier 3.
Yeah, no evasion, so that's the reason. Still, fine card. Yeah. Then we have Bane of Bala Ged. If I say that correctly. For 7 mana, it's a 7/5 creature, and when it attacks, defending player exiles 2 permanents he or she controls. So Annihilator 2 somehow.
Yeah, they don't have to. They don't have to sacrifice because that's Annihilator is sacrifice.
It's sort of.
It's as good as it's basically Wizards saying, you know what, for those people who really like Annihilator, here you go.
Yeah,
and
I think so too. It's really good. It's tier 1, I think. It will, well, if it survives a turn, it will remove 2 permanents. Just great, tier 1.
Yeah, if I draw this card or if I get this card in a pack, I will find a way to ramp into it because I definitely want to at least try this out in combat.
Sure.
Then we go to Breaker of Armies. For 8 mana, we get a 10/8, and all creatures able to block this guy have to do so. 8 mana is hefty, pretty expensive, the most expensive guy we've seen so far. The fact that it's 10 power versus something else like 7 power is kind of negligible because once you go past 7 power, you're just huge, you're going to kill everything. But the fact that your opponent has to block with all their creatures means that the rest of your army will always be able to get through when you attack with Breaker of Armies. So it kind of gives the rest of your army evasion when you attack with it.
Yeah, sort of course. What is a negative point about it? It does that when you don't want it to do that, even. So, well, the opponent has to do this. I'd say tier 2 too, but other creatures might be even better.
Our first rare is Endless One. For X mana, we get a 0/0 Eldrazi, and this guy comes into the battlefield with a number of +1/+1 counters equal to the amount of mana you use to cast it. So if you pay 2 mana, it's going to be a 2/2, 3, a 3/3, etc. I really like this card because it really grows very well with the course of the game. At the beginning, you can play it as a 2/2 if you need to for 2 mana. Later on, if you have 9 mana, then it is a 9/9. Pretty versatile. It's not the best card, you know, because it doesn't have evasion and that kind of stuff. I would say tier 2.
I'd say tier 2 too. Then we have the next card, Aligned Hadron Network. For 4 mana, it's an artifact, and when it enters, exile all creatures with power 5 or greater until this card leaves the battlefield. Now, chances are it won't leave the battlefield because it's an artifact. Maybe the opponent can exile it. It's pretty nice if you can do this in the right situation, of course, especially in decks where this would work great. You should definitely include it, but I think not the best removal. I think tier 3.
Yeah, it's more dependent actually on what your opponent is playing, which makes it a lot harder. I mean, a lot of good cards you can build around them and make sure that the cards that you have synergy with it, and hence you will do better. This is one of those cards that is actually dependent on what kind of a deck your opponent is playing, so you can't really build around that. Yes, the effect is powerful. Yes, if your opponent has their 5 huge Eldrazi on the battlefield, then this will swing the battle in your favor. But what if they don't? What if they have smaller stuff? It does become a dead card. I would still probably try and fit it in there because there are so many big things, so I would say tier 3. Then we have a Blight Herder for 5 mana. We get a 4/5 Eldrazi Processor, and as we know, the processors like to return stuff from exile into the graveyard. When you cast Blight Herder, you may put 2 cards from that your opponent owns from exile back into their graveyard. If you do, put 3 1/1 Eldrazi Scion tokens onto the battlefield, which of course you can sacrifice for mana. This is actually really good. For 5 mana, 4/5 is a very relevant body, already by itself. It would be very high, except I'm still going to put it in tier 3 because if you don't have the processor, the cards, the ingest cards and stuff, just for 5 mana, 4/5 is a good filler card. If you do have the ingest cards, you are going to go that strategy. Wow, then it really puts you tier 2, sorry, maybe even tier 1 because of how powerful that effect is.
Yeah, I think I would put it into tier 2. Most of the time I will have the Scions of the exiled cards. I think it's pretty powerful, and even if you don't, then you will still have a 4/5. I think I'll put it into tier 2.
Yeah, okay, very good.
Then we have Conduit of Ruin. For 6 mana, it's a creature, 5/5. And when you cast it, you may search your library for a colorless creature card with converted mana cost 7 or greater, and put that card on. Shuffle your library and then put the card on top of it, and then the first creature spell you cast each turn will cost 2 less to cast. Now, 2 very relevant abilities. You will always have a creature with 7 or more mana cost, and of course that all your creatures will cost you less. The first creature you cast each turn. It's definitely tier 1 for me.
Yeah, this is this is why I wanted to talk about this card before you. You know, that's why I wanted to talk, because I'm
Yeah.
so excited about this card. Conduit of Ruin is always good. It's mana ramp. It searches for your bombs, especially very relevant in limited, because you know your deck isn't only full of great stuff. Sometimes you'll just have a couple of really good cards, and this one allows you to find that one. Awesome. I really, really love it. Next card is Gruesome Slaughter for 6 mana as a sorcery, and it states that until the end of the turn, colorless creatures you control can tap, and this creature deals damage equal to its power to target creature. Sure, it's powerful. It is dependent, it is conditional that you have colorless creatures. Sure, maybe you can build around that. You do have to wait till it's turn 6, and also you can't do it to your opponent's face, so they need to have the creatures that you can, so you need to also have bigger creatures or have enough creatures that you can destroy their creatures to make it worthwhile. There's a lot of, it's very powerful. Also, there's also a lot of chances where it won't be very successful, so I would say tier 3.
Yeah, I'd say tier 3 too. Then the next card, Desolation Twin. For 10 mana you get a 10/10, and when it enters the battlefield you put a 10/10 Eldrazi token onto the battlefield. So 2 times a 10/10, that's of course great. 20 power, 20 toughness for, well, 10 mana. 10 mana is a lot. It doesn't have, they don't have evasion, don't have anything extra to add to turn the battlefield upside down. Still a great card of course, but I think only when you have some ramp, because 10 mana is quite steep. Tier 2.
Yeah, I really like this card as well, and what I would like to add to that is, as you'll notice, that a lot of the Eldrazi's don't have enter the battlefield abilities. They have abilities that when you cast this creature, something happens. And that is also one of the reasons why counter spells, I think, are less interesting in this set, because even if people counter that spell, you still cast it, which means you'll still get the effect. So even if people counter your Desolation Twin, you still get at least one 10/10.
That is insane.
That is pretty sick.
That's it for the rares. So next we will see the Mythics.
The first of the colorless Mythics is Oblivion Sower. For 6 mana we get a 5/8, and when you cast this guy, target opponent exiles the top 4 cards of their library. Then you may take any and all lands that opponent controls from exile and put them onto the battlefield under your control. Remember, these lands they don't come in tapped, they come in untapped. It means you can also use them right away. If you've been using Ingest and you've been exiling cards, or with white maybe you've been exiling some creatures or some artifacts or whatnot, you're going to be getting a lot of effect for all the lands that you were able to exile before you cast Oblivion Sower. Even if you don't, still pretty powerful, because there's a chance you're going to get at least 1 or 2 lands when you cast them anyway. I really like it. Tier 1.
Tier 1 for me too. Then we have Void Winnower. For 9 mana we get a creature, it's 11/9. And your opponents can cast spells with even converted mana costs. Now that's weird. Your opponents also can block with creatures with even converted mana costs. This is of course freaking annoying for your opponent. It's a really nice bomb. It's really weird. I like it. Tier 2.
Yeah, remember 0 is even, so there's no shenanigans of people trying to cast Endless One on you. So that doesn't work anymore. And what's also important to remember with this card is that when it looks at the converted mana cost, it looks at the top right number, so the mana that it costs for the spell to cast normally, and not at the awakened cost, for example, which you can cast for more expensive or for an odd number of mana. So always look at the top right, that is your converted mana cost. It doesn't matter how much you're actually paying for it. Then we go to the final one, the granddaddy of them all, the card, the Chase Mythic, Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger. For a hefty 10 mana, we get a 10/10 legendary Eldrazi creature. When you cast Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger, exile 2 target permanents. It's also indestructible, and whenever this guy attacks, defending player exiles the top 20 cards of his or her library. Either way you look at it, you attack 2 times, you're probably winning. Well, actually, you've won the game, most likely. So, and the fact that it's indestructible means it's going to stick around, and the fact that when it comes in, it also removes 2 of the most annoying things, because it's also exile. So even if they have an Ulamog, you can exile their Ulamog.
It can actually only be exiled in the Battle for Zendikar set. Of course, it's a star of the show. It's an instant tier 1. Well, it does cost 10 mana, that's a lot, but well, tier 1.
Yeah, just play everything you can that mana ramp up until you can reach 10 mana, and then pretty much, yeah, you've pretty much won the game, I think.
True.
It is awesome. Always play it. Tier 1, no quite. Tier 0, actually. Alright, those are the Mythics. Let's have a look at the uncommons of the Multicolored. The first uncommon is Forerunner of Slaughter. For 2 mana, 1 black, 1 red, we get a 3/2 devoid creature. On top of that, for 1 colorless mana, we can give target colorless creature haste until the end of turn. This card is so powerful. For 2 mana, having a 3/2 is already really good, because normally you could expect to get a 3/1, but this one has extra toughness, which means it won't trade with 1/1s. Very powerful. Plus, if you cast it on turn 3, then you can attack right away with haste as a surprise. Plus, later on in the game, it's still useful because you can use all your big fatties, pay 1 extra colorless mana, and then you can attack with it right away. How awesome is that?
It is awesome, but I think most of the time you will play the biggest creatures the minute you can do that, because mostly you won't have the additional land in your hand to be certain you can play it next turn with haste. So I think most of the time you won't really use the haste ability, but it's there, so it's nice.
Yeah, and plus, plus in black and red has access to quite a lot of devoid creatures, which are much smaller, bigger chance that you can actually activate that haste.
Then we have Skyrider Elf for a green, a blue, and you can pay X. You get a flying creature at 0/0, but it has Converge, and it enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 count on it for each color of mana spent. So if you only play blue and green, for 2 mana it's a 2/2 flyer, which is fine, it's nice.
Nice, yeah.
If you play 3 colors, it will be a 3/3. I think it will be a 2/2, but still. And well, it can actually be a 5/5 if you just play 5 mana with 5 colors. You won't do that, but well, I think it's a 2/2 flying. Pretty great. Tier 2.
Absolutely. Then we have Catacomb Sifter for 3 mana. We get a 2/3, also devoid creature. When Catacomb Sifter enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 Scion token onto the battlefield. And also, whenever another creature you control dies, scry 1. I really like this guy. I would say tier 2, because for 3 mana it's a relevant body, comes in with an extra guy, so that is 3 power, 4 toughness on the battlefield for 3 mana. Really good. And also on top of that, if you do have a little bit of Scion guys, even if you don't, just when your creatures die, scrying 1, it's not too bad.
True, it's a nice card, very good. Then the next card, Drana's Emissary, for 3 mana, a white, a black and a colorless. It's a 2/2 flyer, not too shabby. Then at the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. Now this could work out pretty great. If it sticks around a few turns, it's a great life swing. Yeah. So tier 2, it's also 2/2 flyer, which is already very nice, so tier 2.
Yeah, exactly. We've already seen in white that we have 2/2 flyers for 3. I picked those very highly, so those can do 2 points of damage per turn. This one actually does a 4-point life swing per turn. That is really huge. I pick it also really, really highly. Then we have Herald of Kozilek for a colorless, a blue, and a red. We get a 2/4, devoid, and colorless creatures you cast cost 1 less mana to cast. This is really good. I would also say tier 2. It really pushes me into wanting to play blue-red because of the fact that all your devoid creatures and all your big fat Eldrazi's are cheaper. And for 3 mana you have a 2/4, which 4 we talked about already. Toughness is really, really big in this set.
Yeah, it's sort of conditional mana ramp. It works only on colorless spells, of course, but there are a lot of those. And those are the most important to ramp into.
Yeah.
So then we have Royal Spout for 3 mana, a white, blue and a colorless. Put target creature on top of its owner's library.
It's a sorcery.
It's a sorcery, sorry. It does have Awaken 4, that costs you 6 mana, so it's an additional 3. Could be used, nice addition. Of course, it's removal. It removes a card, your opponent has to draw it again. He will be able to cast that specific card again, of course. But well, it's still card advantage, it's removal, so it's great. Tier 2.
Yeah, I think it's really good as well. And the fact that for an extra 3 you get a 4/4, that's pretty good value right there. Then we have Grove Rumbler for 4 mana, we get a 3/3 with Trample. And whenever it has landfall, whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, it gets +2/+2. So realistically, it could be, sometimes, say half the time, it'll be a 5/5 Trampler for 4 mana. I think those are pretty good odds. I'd say tier 2.
Pretty good. 3/3 with Trample, then the Trample isn't that relevant, but if it's 5/5, then the Trample will become really relevant. So, good card, tier 2. Then Grove Tender Druids for 4 mana, it's a 3/3, that's okay. And it has rally. When this one enters or another ally enters the battlefield, you may pay 1 mana, colorless, and if you do, you can put a 1/1 green plant creature token on the battlefield. I would rather have Eldrazi, but of course it's an ally, so that would be weird. Eldrazi Scions, I mean.
Yeah, they don't do that.
It's still a 3/3 body. It can be used to get additional tokens. It's pretty strong. I would say tier 3, but if you're playing allies, of course, if you're in white and green, you will be playing allies most likely. I think it's tier 2.
Yeah, so that's true. It's true. Alright, then we go to Ulamog's Nullifier for 4 mana, which one has to be blue and one has to be black. We get a 2/3 Devoid Flyer. It also has Flash, so you can cast it whenever you want, at the same time as an instant. And that's very relevant because its ability states that when this guy enters the battlefield, you may put 2 cards your opponent controls from exile back into their graveyard, so that's the processor ability. And then you get to counter target spell. I think that we already talked about keeping cards in our hands and having to being able to counter spells. Not it's conditional removal, very conditional. However, I would say this one's much better. Why? Because it's also a flying creature. So if somebody doesn't, you keep your mana open, and somebody doesn't cast a spell you want to counter. You know what? End of the turn, you can still flash, cast. You got a 2/3 flyer, which you can use to attack with as soon as your turn begins. Tier 3.
Yeah, I think so too. Of course, a flash flyer for 4 mana, which is 2/3, is already playable, very playable. It has an additional ability on it. That's very nice. Maybe it doesn't work, but it's still quite a good card. Of course, it's still tier 3 because you do need to be in black and blue, so that makes it a little bit more difficult to play. But if you're already in the colors, I think it's tier 2.
Then it's a good filler. Yeah, exactly. Then we go to the last one. That's Resolute Blade Master for 5 mana. We get a 2/2 with Rally, and whenever this guy or another ally enters the battlefield under your control, creatures you control get double strike. This is a really powerful effect. I mean, this guy is just a 2/2, it's not too impressive, and of course, unless you got some kind of shenanigans, it won't be attacking, but giving your entire team double strike is really strong. It makes it very difficult. Your 1/1s can trade with 2/2s from your opponent. It's going to make it really difficult for them to block. I think it does push me a little bit into red and white. I would say tier 2.
Especially nice if you already have the 8/9 trample creature, of course.
You with your utopian worlds.
It's tier 2.
You're
okay.
living in a
Next up, we will have the rares in the multicolored cards.
Our first of the multicolored rares is Fathom Feeder. For 2 mana, we get a 1/1 Eldrazi drone with Devoid and Death Touch and Ingest. Plus, if we pay 5 mana, we get to draw a card, and then each opponent exiles the top card of his or her library. I really love this card. Tier 2 for sure. You might say, why? It's just a 1/1, but it has Death Touch. As you may have noticed, there are so few cards in this set that have Death Touch. And the beauty of Death Touch is that it can trade with very, very big, high toughness creatures. And you know what? There are a lot of those in this set. So, Death Touch is very powerful. I really like it.
Yeah, difficult to block, of course, with a Death Touch. You don't want to trade with a 1/1. And then it does have Ingest, so it fuels your exiling engine and draw a card, and your opponent exiling cards for 5. It's a lot, but when you're top decking, it's great. It's just perfect. Tier 2.
Yeah.
Then we have Veteran War Leader for 3 mana, a green and a white and a colorless. You get an well, it's a XX sort of. Its power and toughness are each equal to the number of creatures you control. Now, you do need a lot of creatures for that, and you can tap another untapped ally you control, and then it gains your choice of First Strike, Vigilance, or Trample. Well, it's okay if you're already in allies. I think it's tier 3. It's just not that great. You do need a lot of creatures to make it work, I think.
Yeah, you do need to be in allies already. Then it's a good filler card. Yeah, it's a very strong filler card then. Then we have a Brutal Expulsion for 4 mana, of which one has to be a blue and one has to be a red. We get an instant with Devoid, and we get to choose one or both. So probably going to go for both of these. You get to return target spell or creature to its owner's hand. And on top of that, it also deals 2 damage to target creature or planeswalker. If that permanent would put into the graveyard this turn, exile it instead. This is a really powerful effect because you're doing 2 things. You're actually removing 2 things from the board. That is something which you can't deal with damage. You return it back to the hand, or even a spell that might, be removal spell. You can just counter that one, as it were, put it back into your opponent's hand. On top of that, also the smaller creatures, you can destroy them. And while the exile probably won't make too much of a difference, I don't think there's nothing that's too toughness and indestructible, so not really that relevant. But it does fuel your processors. Again, if you put that card into exile, I like it, but I would need to already be in blue and red to want to play it. So I would say tier 3.
Yeah, I really love the card. I think it's insane, but just not in sealed or draft, of course. It's just cool. You can actually counter an uncounterable spell with it. So you could counter maybe Emrakul is coming up, which can be countered. So you can counter that spell. So maybe it will be played in constructed, although it is 4 mana, which is quite steep in constructed.
And of course, Emrakul at 15 mana is not. So.
But still okay. But well, I think it's a really great card, but just not in these formats. Tier 3, it's okay still.
Yeah, then we have a Dust Stalker for 4 mana, which one has to be a black, one has to be a red. We've got a 5/3 Devoid with haste. At the beginning of your end step, if you control no other colorless creatures, you have to return this guy back into your hand. 5/3 is big for 4 mana. And haste is also big, but also if you don't have another creature, this is your only creature you're attacking with, it also sucks that you have to keep on putting it back into your hand. So if you're red and black, yeah, I would probably find a spot for it if I don't have any better 4-drop. So I would say tier 3.
But only if I have enough colorless creatures, of course.
Also.
It's still kind of great, but yeah, tier 3. Then we have Munda, Ambush Leader for 4 mana, a red, a white and 2 colorless. It's a 3/4 haste creature with rally, it's an ally of course. When this one enters or another ally, you may look at the top 4 cards of your library. You can review any number of ally cards from among them and put those on top of your library in any order and the rest on the bottom. Well, only on top, so no card advantage in there, but still a 3/4 haste for 4 is already nice. And yeah, well, maybe you need some additional allies, you have enough lands. Great, it's tier 2 if you are in the ally department.
Yeah, I think even if you're not, let's see, a 3/4, we talked already how the 4 toughness is very relevant. The 3/4 with haste, being able to attack, it doesn't have the downside of going back into your hand like the Dust Stalker.
True.
So by itself, it is pretty good. Yeah, between tier 2, tier 3 is really dependent actually, because if you have allies, it becomes way more powerful. Then we have Angelic Captain for 5 mana. We get a 4/3 flyer, and whenever Angelic Captain attacks, it gets +1/+1 until the end of turn for each other attacking ally. You know what? Below the part where it says flying, you can just ignore the rest, because for 5 mana you got a 4/3 flyer. And we know that that is very, very strong. If I see this, it definitely makes me go look through my red and white cards to see if I can be in that, because it's definitely tier 1.
I think so too. Then we have Bring to Light for 5 mana, of which 1 green and 1 blue. It's a sorcery with Converge. Search your library for a creature instant or sorcery, so pretty much anything except for enchantments and artifacts of course. Equal to the number of colors spent, so that's the Converge part. And you can exile the card and then you can play it without paying its mana cost.
Yeah.
So usually you will be in 2 colors, so you can play for 5 mana a card of your choice which costs 2 mana from your library.
Any 2/2 you want?
Yeah,
for 5
great.
mana?
That's great.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, it's just not that great in sealed or constructed or sealed or draft. We will put it aside.
Yeah, definitely put this card aside. It's just not good. No, nothing more to say about it. Then we go to Brood Butcher for 5 mana. We get a 3/3 Eldrazi drone with Devoid, and when he enters the battlefield, you get to put down one of those fun little 1/1 Scions. And also, if you pay a black and a green, you can sacrifice a creature, and then target creature gets -2/-2 till the end of turn. I think it's pretty good in the sense that a 3/3 is a relevant body. It also gives you a little guy, which also if you have, let's say if you have 7 mana, then you can sack it to destroy something. It's also good that it can sack any creature. It doesn't have to sack only Eldrazi Scions. However, is it powerful enough to push me into trying to be black-green? I would say no, but if I am in black-green, I would say definitely tier 3.
Yeah, me too. I wouldn't break my head into being black and green for this card, but still, it's a nice card. Then we have March from the Tomb. For 5 mana, of which 1 black and 1 white. It's a sorcery, return any number of ally creature cards with convertible mana cost total of 8 from your graveyard to the battlefield. Well, the battlefield is of course really great, but you do need to have enough allies in your graveyard.
Well, it could be 8 or less.
8 or
so
less,
you don't
yeah,
have to have,
true,
but it only starts becoming interesting when you have around 8.
Yeah, and mostly this will be 2 allies, so that's nice. But I think the effect just isn't strong enough and too conditional to be good enough in this set. So I would say put it aside.
Exactly, agreed. Then we go to the last one of our multicolored rares, and that is Noyan Dar Royal Shaper for 5 mana. We get a 4/4, so already a really good body for 5 mana 4/4. That's really good. And whenever you cast an instant or a sorcery spell, you may put 3+1/+1 counters on a land you control. If you do, it becomes one of those cool 0/0 elemental lands with haste. So basically, all your instant and sorcery spells get Awaken 3 for free.
Yeah.
That is sick. That is really going to push. If you're losing, this is actually one of those cards again that can break you out of that loss, can put you into a tempo advantage. You use a spell, use an instant, let's say, to remove a creature. You're getting an extra creature on top of that. The difference that you're making on the board is so huge. Pick it super highly, tier 1.
Yeah, I think so too. Usually, especially in sealed, you have a little bit problems with your instant sorceries because you do want to have enough creatures because you need some targets for instant sorceries, of course. So mostly a good starting point is to try to have 17 creatures in your deck and 6 other cards, something like that, 16 and 5 or 6 other cards. But with this card you can go a little bit more into the instant sorcery, which will be quite powerful.
Yeah.
So this makes it really good tier 1.
Absolutely. Then we're going to have a look at the Mythics. Our first Mythic is Kiora, Master of Depths for 4 mana, of which 1 green, 1 blue, we get a 4 loyalty Planeswalker. Now Kiora's +1 is untap up to 1 target creature and up to 1 land. So if you have a mana dork or a creature which taps for mana, awesome, then you can use it a little bit as mana acceleration because you get the land and the creature that taps. Other than that, you could of course attack before, and then you can untap a creature to kind of give it like vigilance so you can block with it. So there's some versatility there. Its -2 is also pretty interesting. Reveal the top 4 cards of your library. You may put a creature card and or a land card from among them into your hand, put the rest into your graveyard. Cool, that could be 2 cards that you could draw potentially. It's pretty nice for its -2. And then its -8 is you get an emblem. And then whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may have it fight a target creature. Okay, so you cast Kiora, you have that emblem, a creature comes in, you have it fight. Awesome. However, afterwards, what happens when you get that emblem? You put 3 8/8 blue octopus creature tokens onto the battlefield. Now we're talking. So 3 8/8s come in and they all get to fight against whatever you want. Yeah. Super, super awesome. No, it's not that after those creatures come in you get another couple of octopi. No, you just get those 3 and then subsequently every creature you cast after that is already dealing damage. But I'm thinking in a limited environment, if you can -8 this, the game is long, long over.
Yeah, it's really great. Of course, it's a Mythic, so it should be great. Yeah, of course, the +1 ability is already very, very relevant to have some additional ramp, maybe untapping creatures. Great, but well, of course, this insane -8 ability is just very, very powerful.
Yeah,
tier 1.
Exactly. If you have this card, you're gonna want to find a way to protect it until you get your -8, and then it's pretty much game. So anything with big butts and defensive stuff in green and blue could be a decent strategy until you get Kiora.
They need to remove it as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Then we have Sire of Stagnation for 6 mana, of which 1 blue and a black. You get a 5/7 creature with the void, it's colorless. And when a land enters under an opponent's control, that player exiles the top 2 cards of your library and you draw 2 cards.
Nice.
Well, the exile is already relevant if you're in black and blue, of course, which you probably will be if you draw this card. And drawing 2 cards is just insane, of course, so it's a tier 1 Mythic.
Yeah, especially fun if you have this card on the battlefield and somebody plays Evolving Wilds, and then you go, okay, I'll draw 2 cards, and then they sacrifice it to put another land on the battlefield. Hey, okay, cool, I'll draw another 2. I mean, that is the utopian world I want to live in. But other than that, just having already the 5/7,
it's great. It's great.
Super good. Then we come to the last one of the multicolored Mythics, and that is Omnath, Locus of Rage for 7 mana. We get a 5/5 with landfall. It's an elemental, And whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, it gets to put down one of its buddies, 5/5 elemental as well, token. On top of that, whenever Omnath, Locus of Rage, or another elemental you control dies, it deals 3 damage. Omnath deals 3 damage to target creature or player. So this is really cool. If you want to remove it, you're like, alright, fine, then I'll probably remove something of yours. Once a land comes in, you get an elemental that can swing for damage, and if somebody removes it, sure, then I'll remove something of yours with the 3 damage, and otherwise it's going to go straight to their face. Yeah, I really love it at tier 1.
Yeah, tier 1 for me too. Of course, if you have for 7 mana just the 5/5, if you don't get any lands anymore, the 8 land could be difficult to get, then it's still worth the 7 mana, because when it does die, you will deal 3 damage, you will destroy something. Still good enough.
Yeah.
And if you do get the lands, it will become insane, of course. So tier 1.
Absolutely. Well, those are the Mythics. Let's go have a look at the conclusion. In conclusion, the colorless cards are actually really good, and that is unusual because usually the colorless cards are artifact creatures, for example, and they're costed really high for what they do. Not the case here. The colorless cards are aggressively priced. The problem is the price is still very expensive because they do extremely good stuff. That means that if you're going to draw a lot of these very cool, very strong colorless cards, you actually want the ramp to back it up as well. And that's not always going to be equally available to everybody.
Yeah, I did see a really great big distinction between the artifact cards and the Eldrazi cards. The artifact cards really weren't that great. I think most of them would be put aside or tier 3. Yeah. And all the Eldrazi cards were tier 2, tier 1. Even the commons were very good.
Yeah.
And like David said, if you have some of those 8-9 tramplers for 8 mana, but you don't have any mana ramp, you're gonna cry, because it's just really difficult to play them.
You're never gonna reach that. You're never gonna reach
so you do need some ramp, and that's why green will be quite powerful in this set in most cases, because you will have the very big bombs which cost you a lot of mana, so you need some ramp. Of course, you also have the option of Eldrazi Science, great too,
which
but
is also
most
green.
of them are in green. So I think green is the best color in this set actually.
Yeah, in combination, especially with if you draw a couple of good colorless cards. For the multicolored cards, we also notice they're also very powerful, also very aggressively costed. You may lean towards wanting to play a color because you have those multicolored cards. We would recommend you do not do that. You better look at how many good monocolored cards you have and try and see your 2 colors from there. Why? Because not only are you probably not going to have a lot of them, and not all of them are going to be in the 2 colors that you want, for example. Also, you do need the 2 colors at that point in time to be able to cast that card, which also makes it a little bit more difficult. So don't try and force your way into 2 colors just because you have that one multicolored rare.
Don't go overboard with that. Yeah. Don't go overboard. Well, still, of course, if you have some of the tier 1 multicolored cards, maybe you want to splash a color for them, but you don't want to splash 2 colors for them to be in 4 colors. That would be stupid. Yeah. So if you really have the greatest colors,
no, that would be goofy.
Goofy, it
would
be
be goofy because that's okay, right?
If they saw that movie, because it's not in this movie. Well, still. Okay, it would be goofy if you would try to do that, but splashing a color is of course possible, especially with some of the mana ramp cards would give you some mana fixing.
Yeah, or if it's a very expensive spell.
But don't go overboard. Like David said, look at your monocolored cards first, and then look if you can do something with the multicolored cards. And if it's really great, you should really try so.
Yeah, and if it's not in there, don't worry, there should be plenty of colorless cards that you can use, which are awesome. Well, I got nothing else to say about the colorless and the multicolored cards.
No, me too.
So we're going to ask you to press that subscribe button right now, because it lets us know that we're doing a good job. It also allows us to make more videos. On top of that, leave a comment and rate this video, because we have a discussion about these cards down there. On top of that, if you want to get social with us, you can join us on Twitter and or on Facebook, and we can continue talking about specific cards as you play with them. What are your experiences? Do you agree with us? Do you not agree with us? It's all fine, just let us know. That's it. So thanks for watching. I'm David.
And I'm Ruud.
And this was Budget MTG Decks.